Hello everyone, welcome back to Liz's Reading Corner. I'm Liz and I like books. This is going to be my January reading wrap up. Just really quickly before I get into the wrap up, I want to apologize for this video going up so late. I've been playing a game of catch up basically all of February. I've almost caught up with everything, and so my videos will be more on track next month, but just this month has been just a game of catch up because January was a complete and utter wipeout. And yeah, so it's been just quite the experience trying to balance YouTube and everyday life and uni and Instagram, and finally starting to get there, but it's just taken a little bit to get used to. So in January, I read 12 books, which equaled 5,121 pages. Just a quick reminder, my goal for this year is 80 books and 40,000 pages. So I'm roughly 50% of the way through my goal already, which is actually a surprise. I read far more books than I expected this month. My average star rating for January was 3.5 stars, and I DNF'd 2 books this month. So in January, I made an account with Storygraph. So I have an account on the Storygraph, and Goodreads account. So if you would like to add me, I'll leave my links for my account or my pages in the description. This was a suggestion from a friend because I didn't even know that the Storygraph existed. I have been using Goodreads for, I think, 5 years, roughly, on and off. I started using Goodreads more last year, and so it's now become like my main way of tracking books and that sort of thing. So what I like about Storygraph, which Goodreads doesn't actually give you, is the breakdown that you can get and the fact that you can look at your analytics by month, which is really cool. So it's a lot easier to figure out your average rating and like your percentages as to like which genres you've read more and how fast or slow paced the books are that you're reading, which is pretty cool. I don't like the fact that it's pie graph, or that they use pie graphs, because I don't like pie graphs. I'm one of those people. But yeah, I really like that you get all of these analytics that you can sort of track your reading by, which is pretty cool. I also really like the fact that the reading challenges are easy to find. They actually specifically have a category for reading challenges, and the books that you read, like, you have to manually add the books in, but I think it just gives that little bit extra interactivity, which is pretty cool. And as much as that sounded like a sales pitch, it's just, I'm excited for a new way of tracking my books and like tracking my reading and that sort of thing, so that's pretty cool. I think though Goodreads still is like my main way of tracking what I read. So now that I've waffled on for a little bit, I will go into the books that I read in January. Obligatory, there's a spoiler alert. There's probably going to be spoilers discussed, I'm pretty sure. I have this habit of adding in spoilers to books that I really don't like and trying not to spoil books that I really do like. So yeah, there'll be spoilers. Sorry guys. So the first book I read was Sabriel by Garth Nix. This is the first book in the Old Kingdom series, which from what I can see has 6 books and 2 novellas. It's a YA fantasy series. This book follows Sabriel, who has powers to see the dead, and she goes through a journey of basically just discovering who she is and where she's come from and who her ancestors are. Sabriel has to journey to the Old Kingdom, which is where her father lived, to find her missing father, and it's nothing like what the stories have told her or what she really expected. I originally picked this book up, like I said a couple of videos ago, because Sabriel is the name of my friend's cat, and I thought it would be really cool to read a book that is got the same name. And I didn't really have any expectations going into this book, but my gosh, it was good. I really, really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I anticipated, which was a little bit surprising. I really enjoyed the storytelling and the world building. The characters were likable or not likable, depending on how you were meant to see them in the book. the story was like, was very different. It was very different to most other fantasy novels, and I don't really want to explain how different it is because it gives away like the main plot line, and I liked the story enough. Like I just said, I don't want to give away plot lines for story or like main story points for stories that I really like. But yeah, it was really different, and I would recommend this book for teens who are just trying to get into the fantasy genre. It's a really good gateway book into fantasy. And even if like you're an adult who wants to read like a cozy fantasy story, I would highly recommend this. It was really easy to read. It was just a really nice book, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read What We All Saw by Mike Lucas. This I didn't realize was actually a YA book until I started reading it. This is a horror YA book. It follows 4 friends who play around a quarry. They're bullied by this other boy and his group of friends, and this bully attacks them in a quarry near the quarry, sorry, and all sorts of just craziness happens. They believe that the quarry is haunted by a witch. I think the quarry actually was a place where in history they had taken witches to be tested as to whether they were witches, and so these children really believe that this place is haunted by a witch, and it turns out that it's kind of true but also not at the same time. It's, if I'm really honest, it really felt like it was just trying to be a YA version of Stephen King's It, and it's not quite up to the same level. The story, I shouldn't say the story, the premise of the book is good. The writing is not terrible, but the characters are just kind of bland and generic and not very interesting. Even the witch is not very interesting. Like the witch side of the story is not very interesting. The stories are really slow. I had to struggle. So when I'm struggling with a book, what I'll do is I'll read chapter for chapter. So I'll get a book that I'm really interested in, and I'll read a chapter of that, and then I'll have the book that I'm not interested in, and I'll read a chapter of that, and it kind of makes the slow book go a little bit faster. So if I'm really struggling with a book, which I was really struggling with this one, that's how I kind of get through it. The ending is also really like abrupt. It just sort of ends all of a sudden, and it feels like it just was very rushed. The ending didn't really make a lot of sense to me, if I'm really quite honest. I just didn't really enjoy this book. So because of all of that, I gave this book 2 stars. Next was The Sliver of Darkness by C.J. Tudor, which if you've watched any of my videos, you know I am an absolute stan for C.J. Tudor. I love all of her books. I have read all of her books, I think, twice at least. I'm about to do another reread of them because she has a new book coming out very soon, and I'm extremely excited for that. She's my favorite author. I honestly think she's better than Stephen King. But anyway, so Sliver of Darkness. This is a collection of just 10 short stories that she has written. They're just individual stories. Each one is kind of creepier than the last, and they explore sort of modern day scenarios, for lack of a better word. It's something I really think that you should, if you enjoy horror, it's definitely something you should experience. Her writing is phenomenal. I've never found a story of hers that I haven't liked. Like, there are some that I like, or some that I like more than others, but I love all of her writing. So this was a reread, and I stand by my original rating of that, so I gave it 5 stars. Next was The Revenge of the Dwarves by Marcus Heights. This is book 3 in the Dwarves series, which at this point in time has 5 books in the series, but it looks like there are actually 4 more books that are waiting to be translated. So I believe they're published in German first, and they're translated into English, because as of yet I can't read German as much as I would love to learn how to speak and read German. So the next 4 books, I believe, from what I can see, the next 4 books are books 6 and 7, but they both have 2 parts to it. So In this book, we return to Girdlegard, which is facing a new threat, which is hybrid creatures that are half orc, half elver, who are trying to obtain the ultimate weapon, because obviously whoever holds that weapon controls the world. So again, Tungdal, who is the main character, or the main, yeah, he's the main character. There's a few main characters in there because the story kind of jumps around a lot. But Tungdal has to save the country again from annihilation. It's just a continuation of the first two books. I'm not doing a very good job of selling it. The first two books are amazing. I loved them. This series originally was published in 2003, and I actually just discovered it a couple of years ago when we were just browsing through a bookstore, and I was just like, oh my god, this looks amazing. Like I said, I loved the first two stories, and this one was kind of just a real disappointment. I don't know, it didn't hit the same. The characters weren't quite the same. I don't know, from what I've seen online, I don't know how true this is, or exactly how it works when it comes to translating, because I know that like some nuances can be missed when it comes to translating between languages, but they had a different translator for the first two books, and now they've got this translator for the third book, and the general consensus online is that the translator has actually sort of changed not the story, but like the feeling of the story. This really felt more like a YA book than an adult book, whereas the other two were adult fiction. It felt like you were reading adult fiction. The characters felt like they were a part of an adult fiction series, but this really felt like I was reading a YA series, and a lot of people are attributing that to the translator. I don't know if that is the case, but if that is the case, it's really disappointing. I will try to read the next book, but I don't know if it's the same. I'm probably just gonna have to end up DNFing the series, which makes me really sad because I actually really loved the first two books. But yeah, because of that, because I just didn't enjoy it, because everything was just I gave it 3 stars. So next I read Ghost Virus by Graham Masterton. This is the first book in the Patel and Pardo series, of which there are 4 books. Me being me, I didn't realize I actually started reading the second book first, and I finished the second book first, so I've already read The Children God Forgot. In Ghost Virus, there is a series of seemingly unconnected murders across London. Ordinary people are committing horrific crimes against themselves and others, and there's just no obvious connection between the murders, or between the crimes, and the detectives that are investigating the crimes come to suspect that there is a virus at work somewhere, because none of the people are connected. So they come to realize that there is actually a virus that is affecting the clothing, which is tracked back to a Polish secondhand clothing factory where they like strip down the clothes and remake clothes, or just pass them on if they're really good in really good condition and send them back to charity shops. And this virus that is infecting the clothing actually turns people into cannibals. Which is very unique. It's a very unique plot line. So the clothes eventually start to be able to move by themselves because of this virus. And ultimately the army gets called in, and the clothing gets destroyed, and everybody is saved. The idea of the virus is pretty interesting and pretty unique. So the premise behind the virus is that when you die, a part of your soul inhabits the bits of dead skin cells and things that you have left behind in your clothes, and that is what is causing these clothes to be able to come alive and attach themselves to the people who have got them from the secondhand stores. And that's the basic premises behind the virus. So if I'm completely honest, the only reason this book got any rating was because, and call me horrible if you want to, I really enjoyed the horror scenes in the book. They were very graphic. They were very shock and horror sort of horror scenes. Like they were there to shock you. They were really the only thing, in my opinion, that kept this book afloat. The rest of the book was just average at best. There was no character development. The characters were boring. The majority of the story actually felt like it was just a filler that was just there to prop up the horror scenes to scare you. And there was just all of this build up at the start of the book, and then it ended, and it was very, very sudden. And so it felt like there was just a lot of show for nothing, and that was very, very disappointing. So I gave it 3 stars. Next was The Search Party by Hannah Ritchell. This book follows a couple and their adopted son who set up a glamping site in Cornwall, so on the coast of Cornwall. They've invited 3 of their old friends and their families to come and have like a dry run of their camp or their glamping site in order to make sure everything is running the way that it needs to. And things just don't go as they're meant to go. There's a whole bunch of secrets that come out, a big storm suddenly breaks, and one of the party goes missing, and I don't want to say who because I actually really liked this book and I think the twist in it was actually amazing. And the whole weekend just turns into a disaster. So I'm only giving a very brief synopsis for this book because I actually really enjoyed this book and I don't want to spoil too much of it. This book was actually very, very twisty-turny. It kept me guessing the whole way through. I couldn't guess the end. I was so, so happy reading this book, and when I finally got to the last page and I was like, oh, it was good. It was worth it. I think this is my first Hannah Ritchell book, and I think I'm going to have to read some more because I really enjoyed her work. The only criticism I have is, again, the end felt very rushed. So again, there was just this really big build up and then it was over. But I also don't know how else she could have changed it because it was, I think, probably the best ending that she could have given. But I enjoyed this book so much that it is actually in my top 5 books for this year, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read What Have We Done by Alex Finlay. We follow 3 friends who all lived in a group home together called Saviour House as teens. After the disappearance of several of the children, Saviour House gets shut down, and the 3 friends are split up. In adulthood, they are reunited when they all find out that someone is trying to kill them. And they have to confront things that they went through in this group home that they lived in their teens. And they have to try and figure out who is trying to kill them and why. I enjoyed this book. I definitely enjoyed this book. I actually binged it in a day. The pacing of the story was very fast, which really helped me to stay engrossed in the story. There was like a lot of action scenes. It just kind of felt like you were jumping from one action scene to another in some parts of the book. I think the biggest problem with this book, though, was that you are constantly jumping between the characters. So this is not just written from one point of view, it's written from many, many, many points of view, which can be a bit jarring. If you don't like multi-point of view stories, don't read this one. And the other issue I have is that the main character is a Mary Sue, which is really disappointing. So she had everything that she needed to save herself and everybody else. And it kind of ruins the story, I think, when it does that. The bad guys were not terribly scary at all either, or girls, because it's bad girls in this case. And their whininess actually really irritated me a bit. But overall it was a good read. Overall it was a good book. It just took a bit of getting into. I think it took like 3 chapters to get into, but overall it was a good book, and I gave it 4 stars. So next I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by this, if I'm honest. This was a reread. This series is my comfort read. I love reading Harry Potter. I started reading it when I was a kid. I was one of those Harry Potter kids. I was also one of those Harry Potter teenagers that lined up at midnight for the book releases. I generally tend to read Harry Potter at least once a year, if not every other year. But this year's a bit special. So I got the Mina Lima editions or the special editions for the first 3 Harry Potter books, because that's all they've released so far. I got them for Christmas last year, and as much as I wanted to just look through them and read through them straight away, I also couldn't read them because I'd already read Harry Potter last year, and so it wouldn't count. Even though it's a reread and everything counts, in my mind it didn't count towards my reading goal. So I started reading it this year. These are so pretty, so pretty. I don't want to ruin everything, but I just want to show you guys just how pretty these. So there's a lot of drawings like this, and there's also little bits like this. So you've got the fat lady, and you can go into the common room. So that's throughout the whole book. There's little bits and pieces like that in there. There's, of course, the Hogwarts letter, because what would be Harry Potter without the Hogwarts letter? So they've only released the first 3 of these. So we've got the Philosopher's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Hopefully they'll release the bigger ones, or the next 4 soon. I'm curious as to how they're going to get through them, because those books are huge, and given that this is only the first book, it is really quite a thick book because of all of the extras in there. So Mina Lima is a company that was founded by Mirafor Mina and Eduardo Lima. I'm hoping I've pronounced them properly. They actually worked on the Harry Potter films and also the Fantastic Beasts films with Warner Brothers. So they did a lot of the creative graphics for the Harry Potter and the Fantastic Beasts films. I love their style. I love everything about what they do. I love how pretty they are. They're just so pretty. They've actually done Alice in Wonderland and a lot of fairy tale books as well. I'm probably going to be collecting like everything they do. Obligatory, not sponsored, just a massive fan of how pretty their books are. And Harry Potter doesn't really need any introduction. Like, most people, if they don't know, or like if they haven't read or watched the movies, they know what Harry Potter is. So it was just me being super excited about a special edition book, basically. And 5 stars. Like, this book is always going to be 5 stars. I don't think I'll ever rate a Harry Potter book anything less than 5 stars. Next was Poppy Wars by R.F. Kuang. This is also a reread. This is book 1 in the Poppy Wars series. There are 3 books in the series. And also a 15-page novella, which I didn't even know existed, but it is apparently recommended that you read it after the 5th chapter in book 3. So when I go into the Burning God, into reading the Burning God, then I guess I'm going to be reading the novella as well. So in this series, we follow Rin, who is a war orphan that is adopted by a family, or a couple with a son, I should say, who run a shop and also an illegal poppy business. They're trying to marry Rin off in order to further their business prospects and their criminal enterprise. But Rin is studying for the Keju, which is an empire-wide test to find the most talented people to study, or the most talented youths to study in their academies, and basically to just like run the empire. Rin, unsurprisingly, or actually surprisingly, so she actually has to really study for this. She's not a Mary Sue in the slightest. So she aces the test, which is a surprise to everyone, including the people at the academy that she ends up going to. She gets admitted into the most elite military school in the empire, where she's basically surrounded by the children of the elites in the empire, like the most upper class people in the empire. And so she's already, because she's poor, at odds with all of her classmates. She's targeted not just by these classmates, or not just by some of these classmates, but also by some of the teachers who believe that she just shouldn't be there. She discovers she has this rare aptitude for shamanism, which is like this mystical ability to speak to the gods or to use the gods' powers, and she has to learn to control these powers or risk everyone and everything around her, including those people that she has made friends with at the academy. So Honestly, this is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. It's just so well written. The characters are amazing. You're immersed in the book, or at least I was immersed in the book from like start to finish. I love that Rin is not a Mary Sue. She has to work her butt off for everything, which is more like the real world than most other fantasy books. And yeah, there's just a very diverse cast of characters, and it's just, yeah, it's really well written. The shaman trope, or like the mystic trope, where she, like the magical story, or the magical ability, sorry, that Rin gets from her shamanism is not like a typical shamanism story either. Like, it's very, very different, and I liked that it was so different. This was a reread, so this is the second time I'm reading this series, and I enjoyed it just as much as the first time I read it, and so I gave it 4 stars. Next was A Perfect Sun by Frida McFadden. This book was an absolute roller coaster ride, and honestly, it has made me want to read more of Frida's books. It was just so good. This book follows Erica Cass, who thinks she has the perfect family and the perfect life, until a schoolgirl goes missing, and her son was the last person to see this girl alive. Erica has always thought that there was something dark inside of her son, even though he seems to be perfect in every other way. And as the evidence against her son mounts, she can't help but think that he had something to do with her disappearance. This book is amazing, honestly. I don't want to spoil this book because it's just too good of a book to spoil, but Frida McFadden has written this book in a way that has you convinced you know exactly what is going to happen and exactly what has happened and where the story is going, and then absolutely turning it upside down and destroying every single belief that you thought you had. It was so good. I thought I'd picked it, and I didn't, and I was speechless at the end. Like, I sat there absolutely speechless at the end of that book. It was so good. The plot twist was phenomenal. If you enjoy any sort of psychological thriller, highly recommend this book to you. And I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read The Rule of Three, which is a debut novel by Sam Ripley. The story is built on the premise of the urban legend that all bad things happen in threes. So this book follows 3 different narratives of 3 different horrible and heartbreaking stories from 3 different people, and they're just all interwoven somehow. I really, really wanted to like this story. I love a good horror, thriller, scary, urban legends type story, and this seemed exactly like the kind of book that I would love to read, but unfortunately I couldn't get into it. I absolutely hated reading this book. It was just such a chore to read. It was really slow paced. It was really drawn out. The characters were not exciting in the slightest. Some of the time, or actually a lot of the time I should say, I was just kind of confused as to where the story was going or how they connected. And it ended incredibly abruptly, which seems to be the theme for this month's reading. And it just kind of left a lot of things feeling unresolved, and that kind of frustrated me. So unfortunately, this was only a 2-star read. And lastly, I read Return to Half Moon Farm by Holly Hepburn. I have so many regrets for picking up this book. I judged this book by its cover. It looked like it was going to be just like one of those cozy reads. I should have absolutely researched it. Have I learned my lesson? Probably not, because I'm still going to judge books by their cover. And I really should have DNF'd this book. I really didn't like it. But here we are. So this is a story about starting over. We follow Daisy and her twin boys who move back to Kent into her mother's home so that Daisy can look after her mother after her mother has had a heart attack. Daisy used to spend time in this town and in this home as a child because it was her grandparents' home before. She obviously has very fond memories of this place and like playing here when she was a child. Daisy finds some letters that were for her grandmother from someone who is not her grandfather. So there's like this historic love triangle, basically. And so when she goes searching for answers, she ends up becoming friends with some of the villagers. She also ends up in like a love triangle herself with two of the local men, and these men are like polar opposites. Both of them, if I'm honest, are just like a bunch of red flags to me, but in the end she has to choose between these two people. I know I've not done a really good job of explaining this book or just really even selling this book. I didn't enjoy it. It was horrible. It's a romance novel. I should have known. Like I said, I really should have just DNF'd it. I just really wanted it to be something it was not. It kind of actually felt a little bit like a retelling of Romeo and Juliet in some parts too, but it wasn't a good one. It wasn't something I should have just DNF'd it, like I said. And now I'm rambling. So all of that to say, I gave it 2 stars, didn't enjoy it, and I really need to learn to research my books better. So I also DNF'd 2 books this month. The first book was We Ate the Dark by Mallory Pearson. This was a first reads from Amazon Prime. For those of you who don't know, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you'll get 1, maybe 2 books free a month as a part of your membership. And this was my pick for, I think it was January. I can't remember if it was December or January, but this is one of my picks. So this story follows Frankie and Sophia, who are twins. One day, Sophia is found stuffed into the trunk of a tree in the middle of an abandoned house that is falling down. Years later, Frankie reunites with her friends, and they try to solve the puzzle of Sophia's murder. This is another book I really wanted to enjoy. It seemed like something that I would actually enjoy reading because, again, like murder mystery, psychological thriller, that sort of thing. I got about 10% of the way through the book, and I had to DNF it. I found the story really uninteresting. I found the descriptions were just too wordy. Like, I don't like waffle. Even though I talk a lot, I don't like reading waffle. And so if you have a book that is really, really wordy and like overly descriptive, I'm gonna get bored. I don't like it. This book was just so overly descriptive that I was at the point of I was desperate to find out what the plot of the story was, because I still had no idea what it was 10% of the way through. And I didn't like the characters in the story either. It was not a book for me, and I'm not going to be picking it up again. Like, some of my DNFs I'll kind of like soft DNF and I'll pick them up again later, but this one I'm not going back to this book. And the second book that I DNF'd in January was The Last Caretaker by Jessica Strawser. This story centers around divorcee Katie, who gets a caretaker job in a national park with her friend Bess. Bess lives, I think, close by, but Bess is also a caretaker in the national forest, but she lives there with like her family. So when Katie gets to the caretaker's cottage that she's going to be living in, she finds out that the previous caretaker has left behind a lot of really personal things and a lot of really personal belongings. And then all of a sudden one night, a terrified woman turns up at the caretaker's cottage expecting help and a safe place to stay, which is a surprise to Katie. And this kind of just leads Katie down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out who the last caretaker was really and what she was involved in, and basically how to help this woman and what to do in the future and that sort of thing. Initially, I was really pulled into the story. It was really interesting, but then it just kind of tapered off and it just became, I think, boring. I don't know. The more I got into this book, the less I liked it, and I don't know if it just wasn't the right time to read it, or if it just wasn't, I wasn't connecting with the book, but something just made it meh. And so I got really bored with reading it, and I DNF'd it because life's too short for books we don't like. So those are all the books that I read and DNF'd in January. Overall, I would say it was about an average month, specifically with regards to like new books that I've read. Like, I already know with rereads that I like those books, which is why they're rereads. But yeah, with all of the new books that I've read, it was just kind of average. It wasn't the worst month I've had, but it definitely wasn't the best month that I've had. Have you read any of these books? If you have, I'd love to know your opinion on them. If you have any suggestions for books that you think I would like to read, I would love to hear them as well. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up if you've stuck with me this far, and all of my info dumping on books that I've read. If you could leave me a cat emoji in the comments, that would be amazing. If you like what I do, subscribe for future videos, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.